At 22, I was living out of my car. My first business had failed spectacularly. I was $10,000 in debt, and I had no family to fall back on. A decade later, I was at Google Cloud negotiating multi-billion-dollar deals and earning a reputation as one of the top consultants in the Silicon Valley. What bridged that gap from homelessness to high-impact success was really just education. In this lecture series, I'll share a college-level business education distilled through the lens of a real-world experience. These are principles that I use every single day on the job today, but also were the tools I used to rebuild my life and build a thriving career. My hope is that you find them just as valuable on your own journey. So let's dive in, and thanks for watching this series. First off, I'm going to try to tell you a little bit about my story, and it's a really unlikely journey that is really important that you all understand if you want to understand how I'm going to teach this course. So first, I was homeless at the age of 19. Then I found a place. Then I was homeless again when I was 21. And I had a lot of instability in my life. My mom passed away when I was young. I had really no family support. I never met my father. And I was pretty much independent. And I didn't know a lot. I barely graduated high school. And one of the first things I did when I turned 18, 19 is I thought I knew everything in the world, and I built a recording studio. I was a musician that would go do singing and recording for local studios in Calabasas, Los Angeles. And I was so pumped up about it that I thought, hey, I've been in studios ever since I was 15, 16. I can go do this myself. So I took all that money. I was also waiting tables, got a little bit of help from other people, and built up a recording studio and lived out of that recording studio for a while I built a business. And so while I was doing that, I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't know anything about business at all. It completely bombed. My partners left. I had theft happen. I had customers who never paid me. One of my least favorite stories, but it's funny in retrospect, was client who was supposed to give me $10,000 paid me in a clunker car. That clunker car fell apart while I was driving on the freeway, and I went Fred Flintstone style, feet running on the freeway because a hole underneath rusted while I was driving on the freeway, and I had to pull aside. So that recording studio completely went bust. I was over $10,000 in debt, and I was living out of my other car that I owed debt on, and I was really struggling and homeless. I made a huge pivot when I was trying to figure out where I went wrong with a business, and that big pivot was going back to school. Luckily, we have a great community college system here and state college system in the United States, and I was able to go back to school while I was working a waiter job. I started tutoring because I was quite good at math, and started tutoring in statistics and in business concepts, and started doing small business consulting. And I was making more money from this tutoring business than I was in waiting tables or any other job I could find. And I was making more than this huge recording studio I built. And I wasn't making money from that recording studio, but I was making money from tutoring. And I had no fixed cost associated with it. And that's what really got me excited about business in general. And I was thinking about becoming a business attorney, but I realized you can become a CPA, a certified public accountant, and get there so much faster. And I got to do an internship with a public accountant and realized that you could learn a ton about business by just looking at other people's books. That journey crazily led me to the big four accounting firms like Deloitte. Then I went to a boutique consulting firm in the Bay Area where I got to work on big IPOs, technical accounting implementations and project and management consulting and equity structuring. And that ultimately led me to Google, where I was at Google for 5 years at Google Cloud. And I got to be the chief of staff for the controllership department there, lead up their AI deals desk, and work on multi-billion-dollar deals. I'm going to walk you through what didn't work for me, what I learned along the way. You don't have to learn it that hard way, and how I eventually leveraged all of that experience to wind up at the top echelons of finance, really, in the corporate world, and then leave it all to go start my own business. Now I work as a consultant for PCG. I do management consulting, financial transformation consulting, deals desk work. I educate at San Jose State and Ohlone College and Kennedy High School, and I'm a writer. I also do podcasting and educational content on YouTube because I'm really passionate about sharing this all with you. I was in a tough spot at one time, and it's meaningful for me to share this information with you. So I want you to understand that journey. Business knowledge really did save my life, and understanding value creation moved me from surviving to thriving. So when you're homeless, every day is about for survival. I remember really struggling just to get food. I remember borrowing $10 from friends and having them hassle for me to give it back to them. I was really struggling just to get by. I had no financial knowledge given to me by any of my family members. All I saw from my family members was just how to struggle and how to live paycheck to paycheck. And then I didn't have any family after that. So it really left me with no tools. So what I learned when I started studying business was, hey, there's actually a structure to all of this. It's not just you have to live paycheck to paycheck. And it's not just you are lucky if your business works. If you chase your passion, your business will work. There's actually a science behind businesses, how they work, how value is created, how you can measure risk and reward, how economies function. And if you sit in this class and you take these lectures, you're going to move from just trying to build a life this haphazardly to being able to build a life that you actually love, that you actually want. And this isn't a theory. This is really a roadmap for your future if you apply the lessons in this class to your own personal businesses one day, to your careers, or just to leveraging them for other people's businesses. So the first part I want to talk about in my story here is, even though I was homeless, I want to really stress that I was supported. We are really, really in a good spot economically in this country. And it's really hard to get a grasp on that because, yeah, there's inflation. Yes, especially where I am, the Bay Area, it's really hard for a lot of people to make ends meet with rent. But even being homeless at a young age, I have a better quality of life than many other people in the world. For $10 a month, I was able to get a really nice gym membership, or at least a gym membership with showers and kind of a place where you could watch TV and sit on a couch and do homework. There was food banks. I never used them, but I knew there was food banks that can provide nutritious meals. And honestly, food was pretty cheap. Like I could go work and pick up, there's lots of different types of jobs if you're willing to put in the work. And I was able to get pretty nutritious food by going to any grocery store and getting bananas, apples, bread, sandwiches, things like that. Really basic foods are available and you're not starving to death. When I did get sick, emergency rooms would take me and they wouldn't turn me away even if I didn't have payments. There's public libraries with internet. There's community colleges and state colleges that would pay you with FAFSA. A capitalist economy produces surplus. And so you're going to hear a lot, especially in college, about the values of socialism. And there tends to be a lot of liberal movements or post-liberal movements where people really value socialism. But my personal belief, and I believe the science of business will show you that there is this huge benefit to capitalism where I was able to have this high standard of living comparative to other countries, even though I was homeless and broke and had no family. And so even someone with zero income really does have basic necessities here supported if they just go search for it. And we can argue about politics and mental health all day. Yeah, there's areas to be improved, but it is really much better than most people in other countries could have it. And the way to think of this is that three sectors really work together to provide needs to people. That's all, in my mind, businesses are serving needs for a profit. And that's what I want you all to take away from this. In an ecosystem of business, there's three types of businesses that serve people's needs. There's for-profit businesses. These are like gyms, grocery stores, TikTok, Google. If you're not paying money to them directly, they're making money somehow, like with advertisements and whatnot. You're going to learn about that in this class as well. These are services where companies are trying to sell those services for a profit. Then there's nonprofit organizations. These are like food banks, shelters, and social services. Take in mind, these are normally getting money from the government or they're getting money through donations, but their goal isn't purported to be for profit. Their goal is to provide a service and not to make a profit off of it. There's heavy volunteer load. There's a lot of other really interesting nuances and ethical considerations in a nonprofit organization. Like, can a CEO make $1 million a year for a nonprofit organization? But we'll go into that later. But the goal here is, in essence, they don't keep any of the profit for themselves. And then there's public institutions. So community colleges, libraries, public transportation that are funded by our taxes or debt or bills. The key takeaway here is an economy's standard of living. So your standard of living in an economy is when these three sectors work well together, they're going to increase your standard of living. None of them work alone. They're strongest when they support each other. So an example here is you go to a grocery store, you can't afford the food there. Well, you find out that the grocery store donates all its food to a nonprofit organization when it's about to go bad, when it's not stale, but it's like, hey, they can't sell it anymore. So maybe just like a few day old bread goes to the nonprofit organization. The food bank, so if you can't afford the food, you go there. They're supporting each other. And then if there's a real challenge there where a family isn't getting enough food at the food bank, normally there's public institutions that will provide things like food stamps or transportation or buses so that you can get to where you need to go in order to get the food that you need. So that's just an example of how the whole ecosystem works together. But it gives a good question then. If there's all these different types of services happening in an ecosystem, what really is a business? And what we're going to be focusing on throughout this whole class is really a business being an organization that's aimed at a profit. So we're not going to talk about nonprofits as much. We're going to be focusing on serving needs, supplying goods and services to satisfy those needs in order to make a profit. So what does a profit mean? A profit is revenue minus expenses. So to figure out what your profit is, you take all the money you made, less all the money you spent, and you have your profit. Now, I want to be clear. We're going to go into this class. Revenue is actually a really complex topic. Expenses are a really complex topic. Profit and earnings and taxes, there's all of these different definitions for these words, and these words have very explicit meanings depending on what class you're looking at or what lens you're looking from. So we're just going to anchor on these definitions for this Business 101 class. And if you want to go to one of my Accounting 101 classes or more of my advanced technical classes, we can go into all day about the theory of profit versus earnings, or what really is gross revenue versus net revenue. We're not going to talk about that here. And so if revenue is coming in, then you have more revenue than your expenses, you have a profitable business. If you have more expenses than your revenue, then you have a loss. So was my recording studio a business if it was constantly lost money? And so what I would aim here, I'll give you my perspective, is that I was aiming for it to be a business. I obviously didn't want it to be and not profitable. But I think it is a good debate on, I also was an idealistic kid, and I wanted to bring in partners and friends who were going to help me support and build this business and make it thrive. And I didn't make them pay to bring into partnerships. And I was just stupid in a lot of different ways. And there's a question on if I was trying to approach the studio business as more of a non-for-profit business. And then there's a broader question as not-for-profit businesses really a business. And I think you can go into the definitions of what a business is in a lot of different details. And like maybe you're a business if you just service a need without aiming for a profit. But I will argue throughout this course that you really need to aim for a profit for it to be sustainable, because a profit is showing you that the benefit is actually truly benefiting society. The business is actually benefiting society. If you don't make a profit with your business, it's actually an experiment that you ran that isn't sustainable or scalable for society. And so you could think of businesses almost in a way of all of these little experiments that people are running in order to create something that creates value to such an extent that people are voting for that business with their dollar, which ultimately grows the whole pie for all of society. So let's go zoom back into my recording studio disaster. So what went wrong? I went and I built a recording studio from the ground up. I mean, I had a box of a room in this place called, I think it was Thud Studios in North Hollywood. And I bought all of the gear. We set it up. I even put a little disco ball up on the top of the ceiling. We were having a great time. And I was recording people. I actually had artists coming in, playing different types of music. I also played music there, and some of them even paid. But what went wrong there? Quite a few different pieces here. Not understanding what I was trying to accomplish from a business plan. First is I did zero market research. I just went in with a dream, knowing I was passionate about music and that I had some kind of skill in the music industry, and I was there for a little bit. So I figured, hey, I'm just going to go into something that I know. So I didn't research like how profitable a business like that is, what's needed to run it successfully. How much should you actually charge your customers? How much should you actually charge your vendors or pay your vendors? How do you collect from your customers? What are my competition? What are they doing? How much are they charging? What kind of equipment did they have? I did none of that. I just kind of went in, eyes closed, and tried to build something from the ground up. This kind of business, you're going to find businesses have different types of fixed costs or cost structures. So we're going to talk about fixed costs and variable costs in later videos. But the idea is some businesses take more money up front to build. If it's something that's heavy in equipment, heavy in construction, you have to build a building to grow the business. If you have to house it somewhere, if you have to have a tractor, anything that's really a large piece of equipment that's going to cost money up front is this fixed cost. And the idea is that that fixed cost should be leveraged. So over time, that fixed cost should help you generate more capital. So the idea that, hey, I built this studio, other people can't build these studios, so I should be able to charge more for my time. You're going to find that I couldn't. I actually couldn't charge more for my time based on what my skill set and my limitations, which we're going to go into. There's also some other issues is I built a C Corp. I didn't need one. We're going to go into business structuring in this course. So like I built a C Corp unnecessarily because I thought it sounded cool and some lawyer advised me to, and I spent a bunch of money on it. I had no financial planning of break-even costs of how much I had to earn, how much I had to make this thing make sense. Ultimately, the result was I burned a bunch of cash trying to build a business. In about 2 years, it all went to the ground. I had to shut it down. I had to talk to the partners about asking them to take money back because I gave them loans in order to enter into the partnership. They didn't want to pay. There was theft. There was customers who didn't pay. I had a nervous breakdown and got really sick for quite a bit because I had no home, was living out of a studio I couldn't afford anymore, and I had to sell my whole life tree. But that's not where it ends, thankfully. Every failure teaches a really valuable lesson. And this expensive mistake taught me all about the factors of production, which we're going to explore in this next slide. So whenever you're building a business, I want you to think of these 5 factors of production. These 5 factors of production are anything you need to create value. And you kind of need all of these in order to create some type of value. First is natural resources. So you need the physical space, the money in order to pay the rent for the physical space and all of the equipment. Labor, I needed in order to put in my time and efforts and energy and other people's time and efforts and energy in order to build the studio. So that's my own time here. So think natural resources, then labor, then capital. I needed the cash in order to fund the expensive recording equipment I purchased and pay for my rent. Then I needed this entrepreneurship element. You can also call it risk taking. It's just the book's calling it entrepreneurship. You needed to be willing to take a risk in order to pursue this vision. I could have put the money in a bank. I could have put it in an investment account. I could have just spent it for my own joy, but I wanted to take a risk in order to have a reward. That reward partially being passion, the other part of the reward partially being just hoping to make more money and make a living off of it. What I was missing really was knowledge. So you really need to understand markets, customers, business operations, not just broadly, which this class will teach you, but also specific to your industry, which consultants can help with. You can learn through, I guess, ChatGPT or AI or any of these great tools nowadays. But knowledge is going to be what really unlocks the opportunity to build businesses or help businesses thrive for anyone watching this video. You got the natural resources likely set up, or you can find someone to have it, and you're going to have the time and efforts to put your own time in or find cheap labor on things like Upwork or find partners, especially if you're in college. And you can likely access capital through loans or banks or VCs or people willing to raise capital for you, or even if you just save some extra money from your job. And so the real elements here for you are going to be, are you going to take that capital and instead of spending it on fun stuff or having a nicer place, you're going to take it on betting on a business, and you have the knowledge to succeed in that business. And so a statistic I really don't like, everyone chimes on it, like 1 out of every 2 new businesses fail, or something like 9 out of every 10 new businesses fail. That's looking at the wrong sample set. It's like most of those businesses that failed was because you didn't have the knowledge or took on too much risk and didn't understand your risk appetite. So I'm going to focus on giving you the core knowledge here to understand your market, your customers, and how business operates so you don't make those mistakes. I am convinced that if I had these courses before I started the recording studio business, I could have been wildly successful. And I'm convinced if I wanted to go start that kind of business today, I would be successful because I have the knowledge now. I just think I have better businesses to start. So with that, those are the internal things that we can control. Now I want you to think of the external things. These are external aspects to business that are extremely important and also influence your likelihood to success. So I'd be remiss if I told you that just if I knew all this stuff and I went to run that business, it would have been 100% success at that point in time. It wouldn't have necessarily, because there's other external elements at force. I'm confident now because I know what those external elements are, but those also change over time. So there's always a level of uncertainty. Those things you want to know of are economic risk, technological risk, competitive risk, social risk, and global and legal risk. And so I'm going to go back to the recording studio as an example. I made that recording studio in 2007. That was during a global recession. Not a great time to build a business, especially a luxury-based business that's recording people who are up and coming musicians. None of them had money. No one had money. No one had jobs. And I was asking people to pay me for these things for a discretionary service. Economically, it wasn't a great time. If I had done it 3 years earlier or 4 years later, it could have been a very different story. So when we talk about economics, we're talking about things like interest rates, inflation, GDP, growth, affecting customer spending power. We're also talking about technological risks. This was a killer blow for me. Right when I made the studio, there is Logic Pro that came out. Apple made Logic Pro and people could start recording their own music at home. It's a few months after I made my recording studio. And so people went from wanting to pay $200 to use a recording studio to just buying an Apple and doing it at home. And a lot of people of my caliber, education-wise, were making their own home studios out of their parents' garages and charging $10 an hour. And I just couldn't compete, which goes into competition, the next piece. So there's a technological element that really disrupted the market. You didn't need these big pieces of equipment anymore. And then there's a competitive side of, well, now everyone who can adopt the new technology without getting the fixed costs are able to enter into that market more. So my market really wasn't the top musicians. That's what the big studios were for, as the up-and-coming musicians. And now there's this new competitive market where they can do my service at 1/10 the cost and make a better profit. So that's really challenging. There's also social climate adjustments. So at the time, for example, I was really into rock and roll and acoustic music. And let's say people move into EDM, or people started listening to drum and bass, or social attitudes in general became more like, hey, what about not using studios and doing it yourself? So these social elements change. And then there's regulatory compliance, permits, global strategy. Like if there's a war going on, maybe people want music more, but maybe that music style changes, or maybe like K-pop is becoming really popular and there's a whole style going on globally there. There's international trends affecting your industry. All of this stuff is out of your control, but if you're educated on it, you can make a wise decision. So this is where we're going to stop for today, but I want to sit with you with what would you do? So let's say you own the recording studio. You own my recording studio, and you had bought it with your partners. You had fronted all the money. You're down from $50,000 to it's this week. You see $600 in your balance. You got to make some tough decisions. Your business partner says, I want half of the remaining balance, but you also owe some freelance musicians $800. So now you're broke. You can't afford your rent. You got to pay freelance musicians. What do you do? So what I'd love for all of you to do is actually put in the comment section below what you would do in this situation. Would you pay the partners back? Would you pay the freelance agents? Would you just keep the money for yourself? What would you do? I'd love to hear how you would think through this ethical dilemma, and then I'll respond to the comments below. And then the rest of this time, I'm just going to explain how I think about these type of problems, and I hope it illustrates the complexity of ethics in business. So I just want to be clear about my takeaway here. I believe in these situations, the ethical thing to do would be to be as transparent as possible with all parties. And then I would look at it from a hierarchy of obligations, likely try to pay the vendors or the musicians first as much as we could, explain why we might have to pay shy, be as transparent as possible, and take on the risk with the partners and also leave a little left over to make sure you can survive the day. That way, it's not a perfect solution. It's not great, but that's ethics. It's messy. It's the messy middle that we all have to live in order to survive when things are tough. And we want to be as upright and have integrity through those processes. And the best way to do that is to just be transparent. So that's it for today. Our next section is going to be the continuation of this lecture. And if you're serious about building your future with both passion and knowledge, make sure you just continue to watch these lectures and follow me along for this journey. There's going to be a lot of other great topics we talk about. In the next video, we're going to go through the first business of mine that went really well, tutoring, and why it went well, the factors that drove its success. And we're going to tie in microeconomics, monetary policy, and business legal structure theory into all of this, as well as some other really interesting business theories. Main goal here I want for you all is to realize that if I had all this knowledge at the beginning of my business journey, I could have skipped a lot of these pain points, and that's what I want for all of you. So thank you for watching today and have a great day.